Hey, welcome back to Module 5 of Chapter 3 here in the Campaign Builder Trilogy. This is an exciting module because we're going to talk about modifying and editing live campaigns. The reason I get excited by this one is because a lot of people get stuck early on in the build process because their campaign isn't quite done or isn't quite perfect, and so they don't want to publish it or they don't want to launch it, right? But the reason that this module is so valuable is because this is how you can go back to your existing campaigns and make them better and improve them and layer extra things into them. And if you know what we're about to talk about, if you know all of these things, then the reasons not to launch seem to be less important, seem to be less imposing, because you always have the confidence that I can go back and add that later, okay? The quote that I like that maybe summarizes it more succinctly than I just did is, launched doesn't mean finished. Launching or publishing your campaign doesn't mean that it's hands off and you can't touch it anymore, right? However, there are some nuances to be aware of when you're editing live campaigns. If there are contacts in there, there are some things that you want to be aware of. So with that said, let's jump into the campaign builder and I'll run through a few scenarios that pop up time and time again to cover some of the things that you will want to know as you are editing or modifying your live campaigns. Okay, so the first scenario we're going to tackle here is adding a sequence after an existing sequence. So this one is pretty straightforward. If you look at this sequence, you can see we have one active contact and one queued contact in this sequence. So if I separate these and I add a new sequence in between, let's say I wanted to add some additional steps in here, well, what's going to happen is for the active contact, it'll be like that sequence was there all along. But for the queued contact, they're going to go into this sequence immediately and start experiencing whatever the steps are that I lay out for them. So a timer and an email or whatever else we wanted to have happen there. So in a moment, I'm going to publish this, and that active contact is going to stay exactly where they are, but the queued contact is going to progress through to the new sequence immediately and start experiencing the steps that we have laid out in there. So let's go ahead and publish. And on the reporting tab, you can now see the new sequence has been added. The queued contact should jump from here up to the active contact in the new sequence. And the existing active contact stayed there. So this is important because if you're adding a new sequence, and you have queued contacts who have been queued for a while, this will pass them through because there's no goal that they need to achieve, and they'll start experiencing that next sequence. Now, that might be what you want, and if it is, then you don't need to do anything. But if that is not what you want, like maybe those contacts have been queued for a year, well, you wouldn't necessarily want them to start experiencing your new sequence because it might feel out of context, and maybe those people, maybe their needs have changed, or maybe they've forgotten all about your brand. So when you are adding a new sequence, you just want to give some thought to whether or not you want those queued contacts to go through right away, but rest assured that the active contacts will continue where they're at before progressing through to the new sequence. They'll complete all of the steps in their existing sequence. Okay, so the next scenario here is adding a sequence after a goal. And this one is pretty straightforward. The thing to remember is that goals are an event in time. So if somebody achieves this goal today, the product purchased goal, nothing is going to happen for them because there are currently no sequences there. However, if we add a new sequence here, so maybe we just send a thank you email, right? At the time that we publish this, anybody who achieves that goal moving forward will be added to that sequence. So if you're adding additional automation after a goal, it begins tracking at the moment you publish, and then people are added to that sequence. So anyone who has achieved that goal in the past, when you add that new sequence, they are not automatically going to be added to it because at the time that they achieved the goal, there was nothing planned for them. So if you wanted to retroactively find the people who had achieved this goal, you would have to use the report, set the appropriate date range, and then manually start those people into the new sequence. But you only have to do that once. the moment that you add the sequence, because anybody who achieves that goal, anybody who buys that product in the future, will automatically be added to this thank you sequence. Okay, next up is adding a goal after a sequence. So this is pretty similar because goals are an event in time. So let's do this. Let's say that we just had this initial part of the campaign, right? If somebody is added to this, just like it is, they're going to achieve this goal and be added here, and they're going to get the ebook email, right? If they click that link right now, there is nothing planned for them. But let's say I then go on to set up the remainder of this campaign, and I decide, hey, I do want to have follow-up for those individuals, so I set this up to track that button and to track this button, and I move it back into draft mode. If you publish this campaign, it is not going to retroactively find people who would have achieved that goal and move them on. It's only going to start listening at the time that we publish and move those people forwards, because at the time that they clicked, that goal was not there. So once you publish it, what you would want to do is sort through those 8 contacts or whoever was in that sequence, or use the email reporting stats to find the people that clicked and manually advance them. But you only have to do that once, because now that the goal is in place, anybody who clicks moving forward will automatically advance on. The next one here is adding a goal before a sequence. So we've talked a little bit about this, but it stands up with the rest of the logic for goals. When you add a goal to a campaign, especially a trigger goal, it is only achieved in the future, right? So if I create a note, that note starts listening at the time I create it, and new people who get that note will be added. If I add a product purchase goal, only people who buy in the future will be added. It's not going to look for people who have purchased in the past and draw them into the campaign. So the one exception to that rule is the tag applied goal. So when you configure a tag applied goal, it's listening for a specific tag, like blog subscriber. And then when you publish a campaign, now, I just chose this campaign at random, but when you add a tag applied goal to any campaign and it is set as an entry point, that means people can join the campaign at that point. What's going to happen is the campaign builder is going to look and see, are there people in your database who have the tag that you are listing for, who meet that criteria and have not been in this campaign? And if there are, well, do you want to add them now? And the options are to add the contacts or to not add the contacts or to view them. And then if you choose no, you can also say, yeah, don't ask me again, because you'll get this prompt each time that you publish the campaign. It only adds those people if they have not yet been in the campaign. And then moving forward, anybody who gets the tag in the future, they would automatically achieve that goal because it's published now. So that is now a formal entry point, and those people are being added as soon as they are tagged in the future. Okay, so now let's talk about adding new steps inside a sequence. So this is where it gets a little bit more intricate, right? So when a contact enters a sequence, let's look at this first one, for example. The sequence attempts to schedule all of the items in there. So we've got 3 items happening immediately, a 2-day delay, and then another ebook delivery attempt. So that's another email. So if we decided we wanted to add additional steps here, right, what you can do is actually duplicate the existing items. So 2-finger click or right click on it to duplicate, and then move those down to the end and then link them up, right? And as you configure those elements, you're telling the sequence, hey, I have these new steps that I want to take place, right? I have a few new items that I want to have happen. I'm going to relabel this one 3. And then when you publish, right, it's going to recalculate all of the items in here. So anyone who was up here, anyone who was here, it'll be like those steps were there all along, because they weren't at that point yet. So when you publish, it recalculates everything, and it does the timing over again, and it says, all right, 2 days after they entered, they're going to get this email, and then 2 days after that, they're going to get this email. But if there's somebody who has been in here 3 days, well, they would have been queued, and then when we publish, it'll realize this should happen 4 days after they entered the sequence, okay? So they would start on this timer, and 1 day later, they would get this email, because this email is scheduled 4 days after the start of this sequence. So if somebody had been in here 3 days, then this email would be set for 1 day in the future. So it's going to recognize that, and it'll pull them from queued, right? It'll pull them from queued up into this timer. It'll recalculate and realize there is now a step in the future for them. But if somebody has been in here 5 days or 7 days or 100 days, right, then this step is in the past for them. So it is not going to process that step, because at the time that they hit the 4-day mark, there was no step for them, right? So the reason this is important is because if you add a bunch of emails, an email 3, an email 4, an email 5, and you have a lot of people who have been queued for varying amounts of time, well, they might jump in and get the email that would be next for them, but they may have missed several that were important, right? So here's my best practice. If you have a bunch of steps that you want to add to a sequence, and there are people queued in that sequence, what I recommend doing, here we go, is actually adding it as a new sequence. So just injecting that sequence in there from scratch. And what that does is that flows the queued people through to the new sequence, and they'll experience whatever you have laid out there in the order that you intended. Okay, so the final tactic I want to show you here is a trick I call switching the tracks. So let's say we wanted to redesign the nurture ebook delivery sequence, right? Let's say it's 3 or 4 emails, and I just want to rebuild it from scratch. I want to change a lot of things. I want to adjust the timing, and I'm not sure how it's going to impact the contacts who are already in there. If you need to do something that drastic, the safest way to do it is by duplicating the entire sequence, and we'll call this nurture ebook delivery, and I'll just put take 2. And we can actually set it up to go to the same exact goal, and then we can spend our time configuring, changing, tweaking, adding, modifying, doing whatever we want in this new sequence, because there's nobody in there. And then when we're ready to launch it, all we need to do is switch where these goals are pointing. So we would discontinue those lines, or detach those lines, I think that's the word I was looking for, and then sync them up to the new track here. So that way, when new contacts opt in, they're going to be added to the new experience that we just created. But the existing contacts are going to continue on in the nurture ebook delivery, the original sequence that they were in. So their experience will remain undisrupted, but new people opting in, because we've changed the tracks there, they'll get the new experience. Now, this may be obvious to you, but I want to make sure that I call it out. You would also need to update the link click goal to make sure it is tracking the emails in our new sequence there. Okay, so as you probably just saw, editing live campaigns it's entirely possible. In fact, it is almost unavoidable. There will inevitably be things that you want to add or change within your campaigns, and that is perfectly fine. That said, it's important to make sure you understand the process and you know what's going to happen to the contacts who are in there, so you don't accidentally send out emails that you didn't intend to have send, or so that you don't create an unintended experience for contacts otherwise. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. That's it for editing and modifying live campaigns. This was an important one because once your campaigns are out there, you're probably going to want to start running reports on them. And as those reports give you information, you're going to want to turn that information into action. And this module was all about how you can confidently implement those changes to create a better experience for your contacts and customers. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about campaign merge fields and campaign links, 2 powerful features that are wildly underused, and how they can serve you and your business. So that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video.